Move on to a panel session. One of our biggest opportunities here in Australia is providing active materials to the world. I would invite our panellists to come and take their place on the stage, please, while I continue with the introductions. Our panel is also active, energised and taking on the world's export markets. And who better to introduce the panel than our facilitator, Robin Griffin, who leads Wood Mackenzie's markets analysis for metals and mined commodities. Please welcome Robin and the panel.
Is that on? Yeah. You don't mind, I might sit with the panel, if that's okay. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you, Quentin. As he said, my name's Robin Griffin. I'm part of the metals and mining team at Wood Mackenzie, based in Brisbane. $78 trillion, that's the latest estimate we've got for the capital that's required across the energy spectrum to reach net zero. So it's about a doubling or so of what we're committing every year at the moment. It's both a huge challenge, obviously, and a massive opportunity. As Australians, we obviously want our piece of that investment, and it's why I'm so pleased to be sitting with a bunch of Australia's best innovators in the materials, the advanced materials and battery space this morning. We've got quite a big panel, not much time, so I won't introduce you. I'll let you guys do that, if that's okay, as we answer the questions. And I want to start positively, if I can, and I might just throw this one to you, Sylvia, if that's okay. I'm interested to know what you think Australia does really well. I mean, why is it going to allow you to add value in your particular business?
Thanks, Robin. Is that okay? Yeah, tricky. So I'm a scientist, and so I'm going to start with reminding you that Australia plays above our weight in the generation of intellectual property. I think that's inarguable. All the numbers show it. So I think our primary advantage here is that. It's the collective brains of us and our colleagues in Australia. And I think some of that comes from our ability to collaborate together and not to be siloed, and in a way that I think is actually done very well in Australia. And I think that this opportunity, therefore, and we know, well known, that we are not so well known for commercialising. So what's different about this sector is, of course, our resources. And what is also different is the world. We're in a world that's going through a transition. And the transition, I think, means that shipping big amounts of material around is no longer as viable and will become less and less viable in a decarbonised world. And so the advantages of having the resources, having them on site, having a bunch of smart people who are good at generating intellectual property puts us in a pretty good position, I think.
Andrew, you're from South Australia, I think, or you live there. You chose Queensland. Why'd you do that?
Yeah, I'm based in Adelaide these days, although I did grow up in Western Australia. I'm an engineer. So Andrew Napier, General Manager Technology Development for Livium. We've recently changed our name from Lithium Australia. So from a VSPC perspective, I think we innovate well. We're an Australian company that has a history, came out of QUT, developed technology, and in a sea of technology dominated by Chinese players, we actually have a patented technology for lithium metal phosphate production, so I'd agree. I think we collaborate well. We have strong collaborations with UQ, with ANSTO, with CSIRO to develop that technology. I think we do that well. I think the thing that we don't do that well is transition our technology from like a TRL level 6 to TRL level 9 to commercialise, to really realise the value proposition that technology and innovation offers in Australia, and it's a really step that I think there's an opportunity for us to do better at.
I mean, whilst you're here, obviously we want to be asking people here, government, etc., what they could do better. I mean, we're always here to learn. I thought we might jump pretty quickly into that, and of course you're all in the thick of development at the moment. I thought maybe I'll start with you, Stephen, just on what you consider to be sort of the most vexing issues that you'd like to see resolved at the moment.
So I've got the job of delivering some bad news. So I'm going to start with a positive. I'm also a technical person, and I'm suffering from TMB, too many birthdays, but I still love the technical side of it. So for all the younger technocrats in the room, keep on going. It is a lot of fun, and you can do a lot of good, and we're talking about that today. But some of the challenges that Australia particularly faces, and I can say this based upon a history with Rio Tinto and Alcoa and BHP, big companies, and some time with some smaller companies. Like at the moment I'm with Queensland Pacific Metals, or QPM Energy. Until recently I was the managing director. So I've lived through it going from an idea through to ASX listed, trying to raise a couple of $2 billion. So the challenges for Australia are threefold. Firstly, to build anything, and I mean construct something, the construction costs in Australia are stratospheric. I mean, they are 30% higher than the US or Western Europe. You can look at the data, facts speak for themselves. It's very high cost to build in Australia. Secondly, permitting and approvals take a long time, and there's a lot of slow and arbitrary stuff that goes on. One of the few states that gets it right is Queensland, through the Office of Coordinator General. A plug for the public servants in the room here. The OCG are fantastic, but that is not universal in Australia. And lastly, energy costs in Australia are, again, through the roof. 30 years ago, we were one of the lowest energy costs in the OECD. Now we're one of the highest, and that's thermal energy and electricity. And that's part of the reason why we're here today. So construction costs, permitting, and energy costs are three of the big challenges we face.
Rob, I assume that you can relate to all of those things, but you're a little bit more developed. But was permitting for your manufacturing facility a huge burden?
Yeah, hi. My name's Rob. I'm with Alpha HPA. So we have a staged project in the Gladstone, just for everybody's benefit that's not aware. It's a high purity alumina and high purity aluminium chemicals business. Stage one is already executed. It's a $50 million thing that we've done, semi-commercial. The stage two is sort of a $500 million type of project, and that's what Robin's referring to now. And agree with Stephen, the OCG, or the OG, maybe we could call them, very good at sort of horse whispering through the various departments to get a development application done. So shout out to them. But it's sort of the little things that keep coming up that we've got to work through. One thing I always take the opportunity to say in these environments is, don't think you're going to cut red tape. It doesn't happen. Work with them and keep going. That's what you have to do. But I think the construction cost piece is an interesting one. Just as a case study, the $50 million facility that we built in Gladstone had maybe a peak workforce of 30 to 40 people, which is not very much. It's only it's a shed with a whole bunch of cool stuff inside. And we were flying plumbers from Brisbane. Now just think about that. Plumbers flying to Brisbane, from Brisbane to Gladstone to do work and on a kind of a FIFO roster. And I think that's madness. We need to do something about the situation with construction labour. And I think we've got to be able to differentiate between construction labour and long-term permanent jobs for Australians. So that's the piece to think about. And then in terms of environmental permitting, as it relates to us, we're relatively simple. We don't have any heavy metals in our process. We're a chemical business. We take material that is already highly refined from our friends at Rio Tinto, and so we don't have anything particularly nasty in our effluents or in our trade waste in effect, but it still takes a bit of time to get through. So that's certainly a challenge.
Gavin, you're the only miner, I think, on the panel, or would-be miner, at Julia Creek. I mean, how have you found that process so far, or is it a little early to comment?
Well, yes, before we get to any manufacturing, we've got to get this material out of the ground, right? So permitting processes for mining at the moment in Australia is averaging about 14 years. Duplication in environmental permitting, when you're in a more remote area like we are, it's power, it's water, its acid supply. And as Rob mentioned with the OCG and Stephen, they've created a precinct around the Julia Creek Richmond area, which allows the Coordinator General to come over the top and concierge some of the departments to try and streamline some of that activity. Queensland is unique in that space, and I think we're the envy of a lot of other states because of it. But these are long lead items. Things like power, copper string is vital to us. You know, we had to design a rather sizable renewables project to start to attract that as well, and make sure there was some input into that system. But we're talking about 29 for delivery at Julia Creek. Water is the next issue, being taken up a lot of licensing by Aggie companies. So that's going to be a challenge for us, but again, we see that the Coordinator General can assist us in that as we move forward. And we've always taken this common user approach to government. It worked for us as a group when we were trying to get the common user facility in Townsville organised. Work's still in progress, but nevertheless, $75 million commitment from the government for that. We're taking that same cookie cutter approach to asset delivery, where we'll have a coordinated approach to that, which is a multi-user approach. And we find that works really well. The government can be accepting of that rather than trying to pick a winner out of certain companies.
Where is the acid coming from at the moment? Where do you get acid from at the moment?
Well, we're not in production yet, so it's not a concern for us right now, but it's certainly...
But industry generally,
We're going to need about 4 times as much acid than we've got currently in Australia, sulfuric acid. And that's not just for vanadium producers, but it's for copper, it's for phosphate, it's for a number of other projects that are looking to get up along that Mitres corridor, the Mount Isa to Townsville corridor. There's, I think, an estimated $500 billion worth of identified assets out there that all need these infrastructure pieces to get up.
Andrew, you look like you were going to add to that a second ago.
I think it's been really refreshing this morning to hear Graham talk about hubs, and I think we're just talking about it there, and I think it's very important. And you know, we're not just talking about research and development and laboratory hubs, but really industrial hubs that are effectively parks that have access to power, preferably green sustainable power, water, logistics, that allow businesses to scale, like for our technology. So our pathway is through commercialisation. As Adam Best from CSIRO talked this morning, thanks Adam, that qualification for battery materials is a long process, and you need to be able to step through that. But you still need to have the eye on, you know, your development, your commercialisation and your commercial scale to really bring those attractive returns. So to get that in Australia, you know, to work around the high costs in terms of construction that Stephen's just talked about, we really need to have these hubs that we can create this sort of ecosystem and develop you know, our industries around that.
I wonder, I mean, the things you mentioned are, you know, true of manufacturing, I mean, low-cost energy, etc., labour. Is there something specific, Rob, to your business that is kind of a bugbear that, you know, is more specific to advanced materials rather than, say, the broader battery space or broader manufacturing space, I should say?
I didn't catch this first part of that question, Rob.
So just it's the stuff we've been talking about is more general, probably applies to all of manufacturing in Australia. But I'm just wondering, other issues that you've faced being a producer of advanced materials that perhaps other businesses don't face in Australia?
I mean, the biggest challenge that's probably common in a number of the sectors, so we're in a couple of different sectors. There is certainly the lithium-ion battery piece around dominantly for EVs. We're not sort of in the energy storage unless it's a lithium-ion battery-based energy storage thing, but we're also quite engaged in sort of LED manufacturing as a raw material supplier into it through, be it sapphire glass or dopants for LED phosphors. And then thirdly, there's a fourth tranche now, but the third one is semiconductors, so both silicon carbide and power on GaN on sapphire substrate power semis. And then the fourth one is direct lithium extraction. We've just developing that market in sort of market discovery, but using, again, our materials. And all of those things are leveraging the IP that's embedded within our business. But to the question, each one of those has a lengthy, like Russian nesting doll circular reference of qualification going on, and they can take a long time. And that's common. Doesn't matter which industry you mentioned, of those 4 that I've just mentioned, they all have that process. And of course, then how does that link into funding, which we've got another question about that a little bit later, which I can sort of try and link that back, how to sort of navigate that one. But that's one of the other big challenges that we all have. But in fairness, everybody has that. Like, doesn't matter where you are on the planet, that's also a problem. But but you've got to work out how to get through it.
Is there a solution on the way? I mean, are those types of facilities being built in Australia?
Yeah, so in terms of specifically around EV or lithium-ion battery technology, one of the challenges, because of the nature of the engagement you have with a customer, is they are very sensitive about the feedback and the data that is collected as a result of testing your materials. So if they get and the reason they're like that is because if they get a really good result, they don't want anybody else to know, because you've got they see a competitive advantage. So we can't publish that. So we have to talk in riddles with other customers, which is a bit of a pain, and sometimes makes the process of convincing another customer to try a thing. Having the ability to do swift, commercial independent test work with your material as a drop into, say, some kind of standard battery is something that I think is absolutely mission critical to Australia's ability to sort of leverage into these materials, these advanced active materials, be they anode or cathode. And so, imagine a world where I can just go to the battery testing guys and go, here's $1,000 a sample, or $10,000, whatever it is, whatever the number is, and then 2 weeks later they give me some results. Now, depending on the type of test work, it could be longer than, of course, but it's much more a commercial enterprise just to do work. It's not so much a research exercise. It's a very specific, I just need some test work that I can then use independently to share with other customers as to the results of using our products in their application, whatever it might be.
Okay, well, let's talk about capital then, actually. Next step, capital. I know I'm struggling to hear some of your comments too. I just wanted to get an idea. Basically, it's a global problem, we know, for low carbon. New tech generally struggles to raise capital. I'm just interested in your views on where Australia sits, basically. How does it compare? Maybe start with you, Stephen.
Australia doesn't sit very well, unfortunately. Andrew talked about needing to get your project or technologies up through the technology readiness levels. You want to get it to the point where it's a fundable project or a fundable technology. So you've got to go through your concept and pre-feasibility and feasibility studies before you can get to a final investment decision. There's a lot of discussion about what the government can do, and the government is doing a lot of good things, and we've heard about that. But those good things are helping you get to the point where you get to the point of doing a feasibility study. They get you to the point where you can enter the valley of death, and they don't help you through the valley of death. And Australia is competing with the rest of the world. So you've heard the National Reconstruction Fund mentioned. 2.5 years from announcement to its first grant that just occurred last week. 2.5 years. It's a great piece of legislation, a great setup, but it represents 1/15 per capita that the US is spending in this industry. So capital is a coward. It is going to go to the places where the risks are lowest or whether the support is most. And unfortunately, that's a difficult situation in Australia. And it's our fault because we're asking government to pick and back winners. And when they do that, the media attacks them, we attack them, and it's a pretty difficult situation for government leaders to pick winners because a lot of the winners they are going to pick are going to fail. So it's a tricky situation. I don't have clear answers, but let's try and copy what works elsewhere in the world.
So in terms of what works elsewhere in the world, I sort of straddle the photovoltaic and battery sector, which they work well together in all sorts of ways. And I think there's things we can learn from the photovoltaic sector. So, I mean, a lot of the early invention and proving of photovoltaic solar panel technology was done in Australia by the Department of Telecommunications, now called Telstra, who would never do the same thing again today. We had the first factory making solar panels for terrestrial use here in Australia, and then we let it all go to China. And what happened in China was enormous government support and collaboration with Australian scientists, going and collaborating with them, absolutely. And so that willingness for global collaboration, I think, might be sort of a bit of a missing sector in batteries at the moment. I'm hoping it's coming back in solar to the benefit of Australian manufacturing. So I think that's one piece of it, and that is, so the government funding, but the collaboration and the de-risking through international collaboration, I think might help that. And the other thing that I think helps a bit that I'm starting to see, I also work a lot in the startup sector, in business startup accelerators. I'm chair of the Canberra's accelerator program. And it seems to me, observationally, that we're starting to see high net worth individuals and family offices that come out of that sector, the IT, the startup sector, coming in and investing in our sort of programs because they want to see decarbonisation. So it's a whole different group of people coming in, and we have to engage with them in a way that they understand and can support what we're doing. So that's a bit of it's not starting, but more can happen. So I think that we, particularly on the resource side, and also on the manufacturing side, have to open ourselves up to it's a different world, you know? And we have to be as innovative in financing as we are in our science.
Yeah, very good point. I haven't managed time very well, so we are, and as I said, it was quite short. So I was going to go to Rob and talk about how you got across the Valley of Death, but I think that you might have to share that with people at lunch. I'd love to hear it. But we're going to need to wind down, I think. Oh, has it changed? Oh, perfect. Okay. Oh, great. Okay, I was working off 3.5. Okay, in that case, Rob. Humility. You don't have to be too humble when you're talking about it.
So do you want me to use the 10 minutes? Or?
No. Just
Rob, this is the most important answer.
We're really keen to understand the Valley of Death.
Well, first of all, we never called it the Valley of Death. I think that was maybe the first thing. Let's just think of it that way. But there's a few elements to this. First of all, we're an ASX listed business for what it's worth, and we had a very supportive group of shareholders for a long time. And Sylvia just mentioned some family office type people, like chairman's list type guys and girls, and they've been extremely supportive of the business for a long time. And they're still holders today, and some of them have been on the stock since it was like 1 cent or 2 cents or something. But point being that with the ability to get to and demonstrate the technology at a genuine scale, which is the stage 1 facility that was fully funded by shareholders, then unlocked critical minerals funding from the federal government at that stage 1 facility. That was an additional $15 million non-dilutive cash grant. We deployed that. So then we've ended up with this $50-odd million facility sitting in Gladstone, but after we'd already built and demonstrated our ability to execute a material project for the scale of our business at the time. And that was in 2021 when we raised that capital to do that. But the key to that piece of the strategy was how it sort of de-risked the technology significantly, because our USP is all in the technology. We have a technological advantage, and that's something we've been relentless in making sure that that's what we're exploiting. If we're just fighting going into the red ocean with everybody else, there is no point in going in there. We are focused on where we have a technological advantage in the market. And then in relation to that sort of getting from stage 1 to fully funding, $560-odd million project, there's, for reference, there's about $400 million in debt from the Australian government, and then there's a bit more, some grant funding, and then the balance is about $180 million in equity. That step and that work we did with the Australian government, NAIF in particular, and EFA on the national interest account via the Critical Minerals Fund are willing to take a bigger risk, right? Which is what we're looking for. And just to Stephen's point, the government has to make bets, and some are going to fail. That is absolutely right, but we've got to be prepared to make them. But again, we're in that loop of qualification, like I was talking about earlier, where how do you get an offtake when you don't have a facility to produce the volumes and all that sort of stuff. So that's the circular reference. We got through that by extraordinarily deep understanding of the markets that we're in, significant amount of engagement with multiple off-takers, and I think I shouldn't even call them off-takers because that's a mining reference. That's problem number 2, right? Don't do that. But they're customers, right? And they don't give you an offtake. They buy your stuff because you're making stuff for them. It's got nothing to do with the commodity that you're involved with. It's not aluminium. It's about your thing does something really cool for us, right? So we are a manufacturing business. We are not a commodity business. We're not a resource business. So explaining that, bringing the government on the journey, in this case, our lenders, has built comfort, built credibility with what we do. We're very cautious about only doing what we say. And so that is what worked for us, I guess, all I can say about it. So, yeah.
Very good. I wanted to just talk briefly about the sort of move further downstream. I mean, you're talking about a very niche product that's great. A lot of talk about how far down. I know we've got a couple of panellists who have moving at least to the cathode stage and the electrolyte stage. So I was trying to get your feel, perhaps maybe start with you, Andrew, just on Australia, how easy is it to move?
I think it's been covered well already, and I think we have a real opportunity to realise more value out of our raw materials. So, lithium metal phosphate has lithium, iron and phosphate in it, or manganese as well. All of these are readily available in Australia, all exported predominantly as rock, with huge opportunities to continue to add value. We are a relatively small country with a relatively small demand in terms of, cells or packs or things like that. It's probably a tough ask to say we can be competitive straight away in that space. There's probably niche applications for mining and the like. So I think taking that step to active materials like cathode active materials or anode active materials is certainly a good place for us to start to realise some value. But to take a step all the way into cells, I think Adam covered this well this morning. You would have to import all the materials to make a cell if you want to do that in Australia right now.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a little bit different, Gavin, isn't it? Different end game in the energy storage business, which makes a little bit more simple for vanadium electrolyte producers.
Yeah, well, we do have a real opportunity here in Queensland because the beauty of a vanadium flow battery is that you only need vanadium. You don't need the cobalt, the nickel, and it was an Australian invention, which again had to go offshore to get reach real commercialisation. That's a pity. We went to the 40th anniversary of the battery inception down in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. This is not a new technology. This is something that we're just getting back. But you need to be close to the source of the vanadium to do that. But I think the whole approach of pit to product is what's enamoured government. They own the grid here in Queensland, so they're going to need to be the off-takers, customers of these batteries, or potentially off-takers of the electrolyte itself. So we do see ourselves going from the pit right down to electrolyte manufacture. We probably won't go into battery manufacture. There's plenty of those out there, and you would be
plenty of manufacturers in Australia, you mean, eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of those larger battery companies like Sumitomo and Ronki Power and so forth are already looking to position themselves in Townsville for that very reason.
Yeah.
There are already niche battery cell manufacturers in Australia, at least one, I think two. So, it's the old story. If you're making smaller quantities, make really good ones with very niche applications where they need you. And the advantage for us as suppliers of materials into the battery sector is that if there's a local manufacturing, then you've got a better chance of interacting with that customer, which, as Rob said, so important. Interact with the customer who knows what they want to buy from you. So, I mean, I think that niche manufacturing of batteries and photovoltaics is really important for Australia, so that we can then underneath build the bottom of the pyramid, which is making the materials that suit their needs.
Yeah, very well said. We've got 5 minutes left. You've actually been good at offering some solutions, but I was keen to get your view. We've got battery strategies which have been released recently, both at state and federal level. Just keen to get, I'll maybe ask this two ways. One is, do you think, is that going to make it easier for your business? I mean, are there things in there that would really accelerate development in your business? The other way to ask this question is there one thing that you would really like to see that perhaps isn't in there? And maybe start with you, actually, Andrew. We'll go along. We'll go along the line.
This is, I guess, an important one for us. Yeah, we've really benefited as a business from early stage support, so CRCP type support to develop our technologies, both in lithium chemicals and in battery materials. But to really traverse the TRL step from 6 to 9, that valley of death, we continue to need that support from government. Private equity is looking to be de-risked to come in to help out, and I really think that that's an area that we are in discussion with government about, and it's an area that if we want to grow an industry in Australia from our own technologies, is an area that continues to need support.
I'll use QPM as an example. Our project's a $2.5 billion project, thereabouts. We have $1.4 billion of debt conditionally lined up. We have 100% of the production already committed to customers who have invested in the project. So $1.4 billion of debt. Great help from the Australian government in debt provision through Export Finance Australia and NAIF. Another $900 million from overseas export credit agencies. What we lack is the equity. That's the investors who are going to take a slice of the project. Equity is very hard to get. The National Reconstruction Fund that I've already mentioned does provide some equity, but it is very small. So I encourage governments to pick winners. Unfortunately, the Resources Minister, out of 25 people in Cabinet, is number 20. The Manufacturing Minister is number 22. These are the people who we need to have a large voice in Canberra and large voices in Brisbane as well. So pick winners. Out of 10, 7 will fail, 1 or 2 will wash their face, and 1 will pay for the next 100. And that takes some courage. So if there's anyone here who's going to do that, I will vote for you even if you pick a loser.
Okay, it's a hard one to oh God. Okay, yeah. Look. I think that government's on the right track, but we all need them to be faster. We are moving. We're working in such a fast-moving field, right? And so the only encouragement, I think, what they're doing is good. Do it faster. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to that. That's absolutely true. It's about moving faster. Steve said how long it takes to get some of these grants through. There's big buckets of money there. Trying to access it is another story. Equity markets are extremely tight at the moment, particularly for opaque pricings around things like vanadium. It's another one that's controlled mostly through China and through Russia. So that makes it very difficult for financiers to get their head around that, the opacacy of that market and the pricing around that. And the equity markets are very short term and got very small amount of patience. And when you've got long duration projects such as ours, I've been at this for 10 years already. So we've got quite a bit of way to go as well. But yeah, we have some strong support from our base, but they do get impatient over time, and we need some of that government support to help us along that way for sure.
Last word to you, Rob.
Samesies, everybody.
Brilliant.
I will just add that I can't stress enough with relation to the government strategies around this piece is the technological advantage. To compete internationally, that's what we've got to do. We're up against let's be honest, it's China mostly that have got 30 years on us, and that's what we're facing. So just be very open to that.
Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that is time, I believe. Thank you, panellists, very much.